Hoodoo Plant Mamas. Get your soul fed and your spirit read.
This here ain't no trend. I possess the power from way back when folk were stripped from all of their kin, so they had to find the magic within. Ancestors and gather my herbs, I conjure at my altar. Hoodoo Plant Mamas, I manifest growth and I release trauma.
Child, we just out here trying to water our plants and mind our business, you know? Everybody ain't from the deep south, man. Everybody can't have culture like us.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to season 9 of Hoodoo Plant Mamas. I am your co-host, Leah Nicole.
And I'm Dani B.
And we have been gone for a while, Dani B. What have you been up to during that time?
Child. So, right at the top of the year, I got laid off. I don't even remember what the last half of last year was. It was just so much happening. But I have a new job now, and I celebrated my birthday recently, as did you. So, yeah, I'm excited to get back started with everything. Oh, I started a YouTube channel, me and my 10 subscribers, but we doing it. I'm just going to keep doing it. It's kind of fun, or it can be fun when things don't go haywire with editing and all of that, but I'm finding my flow. So, yeah, what about you?
Same. We celebrated your birthday in Atlanta. It was a lot of fun to see you again in person. And then I celebrated my birthday later that week. Like you, I also started YouTube. I started it last summer. I am trying my best not to have mental breakdowns. It is very difficult, but I am monetized on YouTube. This is my third time trying to be a YouTuber, my first time actually getting monetized. So very excited about that. I'm usually over there talking about book commentary and romance and things like that. I'm going to put our YouTubes in the show notes if y'all want to subscribe to them. Also, I had a book come out in January of this year about the boy. It is a book that I started on when I was 13 years old, and I finally finished, and I think it's a beautiful, amazing, wonderful book. If you're interested in like young adult romance, highly recommend it. And then for my birthday, I did release a little erotic romance novelette. It's a fun, cute story. So if you're interested in that as well, I will put those in the show notes.
Well, let's get into some gratitude. Leah, what are you thankful for today?
I'm going to say that I am thankful for my friends. I don't know why my mama thinks I'm a loser, but she was like, "Oh my God, you have so many friends. Like, I can't believe you're leaving the house and you're seeing people and you're partying and having fun." I'm like, "Yeah, I have people that care about me." I don't know why she thinks I'm a loser and I have no friends, but I'm so grateful for all of y'all. My birthday this year was really special. My last birthday really sucked, my 29th. So I'm grateful to have celebrated my 30th with y'all. What are you grateful for, Dani?
Love to hear it. I'm glad your birthday was special. I'm also thankful for my friends. Like, I feel really blessed, and I feel like occasionally I get really down about like, oh, a lot of my friends kind of live far away, but I don't know. The even virtually just having such an extended community of amazing friends, and just the ways my friends show up for me even if we don't live in the same city, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for community now more than ever. So, yeah.
Well, today and also this season, we kind of wanted to get into the different clairs and our experiences with them. For context, the different types of clairs are like clairsentience is the ability to feel emotions and energy. Like when you have a bad feeling about something and you end up being right, that's clairsentience. Clairaudience is when you hear things that aren't real, like hearing your name being called and nobody's there. Clairalience is smelling things that aren't there. Claircognizance is intuitive knowing, how you know information that you probably would not have known in any other way, but you know it. And then clairgustus, which is when you taste things, or like when you have a certain taste in your mouth for something. And so for me, I experience a lot of clairvoyance where I see images, and it could be that images have the biggest impact for me and they stay with me the longest. But I would say my earliest experience I had with clairvoyance, I was about to go to the 3rd grade. It was the summer before 3rd grade. I was outside. I lived in the country, and my daddy's truck trailer, I was just like laying there looking at the clouds and daydreaming, and I was just like, I wonder what my 3rd grade teacher is going to be like. And this image flashed in my mind of this white lady, this older white lady with short brown hair, and I had never seen her before, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I didn't think about it again until like a month later, when that same old white lady was looking at me, except her hair was blonde, when I started 3rd grade, and I was like, am I a witch? But I think when I was younger, I was so upset. Well, I would say my entire family was so obsessed with Charmed, because it's about these 3 sisters, and me and my sisters, there are 3 of us as well. So we were obsessed with Charmed. You couldn't convince me that I didn't have like latent superpowers that would kick in one day if somebody in my family died. But no, that's kind of the feeling that I got when I experienced that. It wasn't so much fear, it was like excitement. So, Dani, I'm wondering, which Claire do you experience the most, and what was your earliest experience like?
So this is a really like complicated question for me because I think as I've evolved since childhood, it's changed, and I've also been resistant to certain things. So I guess as a child, I experienced a lot of clairvoyance with things like deja vu the most. And there would be instances where I would try to manipulate the situation, like, okay, I know if I do this, this is going to happen. So I'm going to do the opposite and just see how it plays out. And then sometimes I would just watch out of curiosity to see if the thing that I feel like is going to happen is going to happen. But I also had a thing with smell as a child specifically. Smell was something where sometimes I get a bad feeling about someone just based on how they smell. It was usually men. It was almost always men. So there's that. As an adult, I think I might be more clairsentience. Is that how you say it? Which is like to be able to feel the energy of a space or of people and that kind of thing. But it's not something I'm good at controlling, because sometimes I think I'm just the problem until, we have like a debrief. If I'm with friends and I say, I don't know, y'all, I just felt weird and just like felt like my mood was getting bad. And they were like, yeah, the vibes were off because this person was XYZ. And I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. So I didn't really want to say anything. I thought it was just me being weird and awkward. I also feel like that's something I felt in certain ways in childhood, where certain spaces for me, I just did not like to be in them. I could just feel something off. I want to talk about clairaudience briefly. So I had this memory of one of Jujube's episodes. I don't know if she was talking about her experience or if she was answering a listener letter, but it was something about deciphering between your own voice and a spirit's voice. And that's one I struggle with, because I've randomly heard my name called over the years. It's still something that happens occasionally, but also I still sometimes don't know, is this my voice or is this somebody else, when something comes to my head, when words come to my head, when images or stories come to my head about something. Like, I still struggle with trying to understand, is this my brain doing this, or is this a download, a spiritual download or something like that. So I would say probably the biggest thing that I'm learning to develop is the clairsentience as an adult.
I think a lot of times I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I'll hear my name. And for me, it hadn't happened in a long while. But I want to say it was like last week or the week before. I was downstairs and I heard my name. And so I walked upstairs to my sister. I was like, did you call me? And it's just the 2 of us in the house. And she didn't. And I was like, oh, it happened again. But like you, I also struggle between like my voice and spirit voice and trying to decipher, like, is this my thought or is this a thought that, you know, has been implanted? And I think it shows up in the other Claires as well. Like, I know in her book, in Juju Bay's book, The Book of Juju, she said that a lot of Black women experience clairsentience where we can just feel like something is off. And sometimes, and maybe it's me overthinking it, but sometimes I'll be like, am I having a bad feeling about something, or am I being fearful? Like, is it my own anxiety that's going on? And so sometimes I'll struggle with that. One thing I have noticed, and this happened to me when I was going to Atlanta a few weeks ago, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Like, I went to the car rental place, left my wallet, had to come back to the house, went back, their system was down. I had to wait there an hour to get the car. And then when I finally left town, the car that I got didn't have gas. So I had to go to the gas station. My card didn't work. And so I was like, fine, let me go to another gas station. Card didn't work there either. I'm like, oh my God. So I went to a third gas station, finally got gas. And then as soon as I got into Alabama, the dress I was wearing, the strap broke. And I was like, okay. And I just had to pull off on the side of the road and take a breath. And I was like, everything is going bad today. But once I did that, the rest of the ride was very smooth. And I was like, maybe I was missing something bad that was going to happen down the road. That's what I was telling myself.
See, I have to reel myself in because sometimes I'd be like, am I just not supposed to do this thing? Like when I was starting my YouTube channel, I was literally like, do you not want me to do this? Just say it. Like, just say it then. But I think I just needed to take a step back because I was trying to move too fast and just sort of get a plan and write out things and figure out what I wanted to do. So, but I definitely be thinking I'm paranoid with the, particularly, I'm glad you said that with the energy thing. Because I sometimes be places and I be getting bad feeling about people when they come in. And I'm like, girl, are you being paranoid? Because I'd be like, I don't know, this person look like they could just shoot up this whole coffee shop right now, which is extreme, but it's not far-fetched. It's
Yeah.
not far-fetched given how frequent mass shootings happen. But yeah, and maybe it's the sense is valid in that there's something off with the person. But I do think that I do think it's a mix of paranoia because it's like, okay, something off with that person, but you just creating a whole scenario that's taking it a little bit too far. Okay. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I definitely be like, you tripping.
Yeah. I will say that there have been times where I've had a bad feeling about someone, and there were two celebrities in particular where I had bad feelings about them. And I remember people being like, if you hate this person, you're anti-Black. And I was like, I don't know, something going on with it. And then like 2 to 3 years later, they both came out as being like abusive to people. And I was like, okay, maybe that's what it was. But sometimes it is just like, I have a bad feeling about someone just because I'm not going to vibe with them, not because they're a bad person.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment for sure. Like sometimes we just don't mesh with people.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a good distinction to make because that's a thing too with me, even with social media. Lavon Briggs, who's the author of Central Faith, and if you follow Juju Bay, she's been on Juju Bay's podcast. And if you just follow spiritualists, you probably come across her. She has said something about how you just need to unfollow people if you feel yourself like not having a good feeling about this, because sometimes you're unintentionally giving people evil eye and people be having protections around them, which means some of that stuff could get reversed back to you, even if you're not intentionally doing that, which is something I literally have thought about. And I've had to do that because sometimes it'll be a person I've been following for a while. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what is your issue? Like, what is your issue with this person? I'm trying to get a better practice of like, okay, I don't believe this is a bad person. I think that's why I struggle with divesting from certain people because I don't believe they are a bad person. But you work in my nerves. Like I'm annoyed every time I see you on popping up on my timeline. And so, yeah, sometimes it's just like, you fall out of alignment with people, or you just not in alignment with people, and it's just best to take a step back. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person or they're a bad person.
Yeah, I think something else that's important to remember is that a lot of times we're at like levels, and depending on whatever level you're on, that's where you're at. And something I think about a lot is like books. Like a lot of times in the bookish space, people will be like, oh, this person's a bad writer. But then that person has like thousands of people that love their writing. And I'm like, I don't think they're a bad writer. I just think their writing's not for you. And I think the level of writing that they're at, there's a lot of readers who are also at that level. And it's the same thing with like the people we follow, the level that they're at, we're at that same level. And if one of us moves a level, it's like, it don't work no more.
That's exactly right.
So a lot of where this episode came from, there was this clip of Toni Morrison who talked about believing in ancestors guiding us. And she said, my whole education was to make sure I didn't believe in things like that. And I dismissed all sorts of things that were indigenous in my family. And superstition, you know, the discredited information, the discredited way of knowing. She went on to say that when she started writing, that was where the information and the images were. They were in the things that her education said didn't exist or weren't useful. And so I noticed this in my writing as well. Like I've talked before about Apocalypse Still, my short story collection. It was based on these nightmares that I was having and when I wrote them. But what I didn't talk about was like how some of those nightmares kind of came true. So after I wrote Entangled, I had this dream where this person, it was this man I had never seen before, and he wrote a phrase on a piece of paper, and I was like, that's a really weird phrase. So I woke up, I Googled it. There was one article that was about this car crash that had happened with these 5 white guys. 3 of them died, 2 of them lived, and it happened in the county that I had grew up in. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I still don't know what it means. And I don't think I wrote down that phrase because I just woke up and Googled it immediately. So I don't even know where to find it or how to even look that up again. But it was just like, what are the chances that I have a dream where this weird phrase comes up and this car crash happens that's like a mysterious car crash and they don't know how these boys died and things like, and the 2 that lived didn't talk about it at all. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here. Another example of that is Antenna, which I actually did not write from a dream. I wrote that because I got really high. I got really high and I was tripping, and I just remember all these visions that were flashing in my head. I was like, I know for 100% that these things are true, but I don't know what they mean. And at the time, I thought that it was discrediting a lot of what I believe, like spiritually. And so I pretended that didn't exist until December when Ghrey, who's a friend of the podcast, Ghrey sent me this podcast called The Telepathy Tapes. And she was like, it is this podcast that talks about mostly nonverbal autistic people who are having the spiritual experience. And as they were talking in the podcast, I was like, wait a second, this is the things that I had the time I got high, and I wrote all these notes, and I was literally referencing my notes as they were talking, and all the things that they were talking about were the same things that came up in my notes. And I was like, I don't think I can keep pushing this down and pretending it doesn't exist, because it's like, this is real. And it all started with like getting high, and with the car crash thing, it started with a nightmare that I had no idea what was going on. But as I kept living, it's like I figured them out. One thing I do want to say about the telepathy tapes, and we may talk about it later in this season, but the more that I listened to it, the more it seemed like white people were understanding African spirituality. And so they were like, wow, our spirit came here for like a physical experience, and the things that happen in the spiritual realm influences what happens in our material world. And something else I thought was really interesting was that the parents of color more readily believed their autistic children when they were younger compared to the white parents their children was about, I would say the parents of color, the children were about like 8 to 10. And they were like, oh yeah, my child's telepathic. Whereas the white parents, their children were like late teens, 20s, before they started to believe that their children could do these things. And so I thought that that was interesting too. But when I looked online and I was trying to talk about this, because I was like, damn, I'm having this same experience that a lot of other autistic people are having. There were a lot of people who outright discredited this. They said it was propaganda about autistic people with superpowers, which, like, yeah, I get that, eye roll. But also, it's like, we know that nonverbal autistic people are the most marginalized, and we say we need to believe them, but when they say things like this, it's like, oh, but we don't need to believe that. And then we talk about how we need to center their experiences, but when they talk about this, it's like, oh, but not those experiences. So yeah.
I want to respond to the thing about discrediting this experience of autistic people, because it also goes into this idea that people used to assume that if a person was nonverbal, that they had no consciousness. There are other types of like experiences where a person is nonverbal for a host of reasons where they're not autistic and they know what's going on. Like they have an awareness of what's going on. They react, they cry when someone dies, even if nobody told them. Like just an awareness of the energy around them. And so I don't really see why people think this is a bad thing or some type of bad propaganda, because literally it was the medical community that were making these sort of claims, that telling parents that their child was just like, oh, they don't know what's going on, they don't talk, they're just there. I feel like in a lot of ways this humanizes that experience. But, I think that's just kind of based on my beliefs of it's not some kind of magical, fantastical things for people to have these kind of gifts. Like you can have this gift and not be autistic. So for this to be specific to a community, particularly one that is nonverbal, because if you talk to people who don't have certain senses, they say that other senses get heightened. So why is this hard to believe that they've developed the sense that maybe all of us have and don't know how to develop? I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't like that idea of just like trying to write off things because it seems unbelievable, because you have bought into like a very westernized view of the human experience.
Yes, I do want to say that a lot of these autistic people can communicate telepathically with their caregivers. So people who are not autistic, they're able to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Dani, I'm wondering what you think about Toni Morrison's discredited way of knowing and how a lot of our education and socialization depends on that.
Yeah, it's interesting how people are like so quick to discredit things that I say they see as like primitive. It kind of reminds me of the phrase mumbo jumbo, which derives from a West African word and became a term used to describe something that's meaningless or confusing. And I can link to an article that goes into more detail about that. But I mention it because there are all these big and subtle ways to discredit anything deriving from Africa or just Black culture in general. And it's interesting how effective it is that Black people can be Christian, invoke the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, but then distance themselves from our indigenous practices. I'm going to tread lightly when I say this, but as important as education is, it has also been weaponized through the Western lens, because they get to decide what is legitimate knowledge and then it gets recorded as fact throughout these various articles and books through generations. Like this is a systemic thing. So not to like go on a tangent, but I think people have been talking a lot about fascism and anti-intellectualism and this attempt to quote unquote dumb down folks to better control them. But then on the other hand, there's a reason people find it easy to turn away from the work of people like scientists and historians and sociologists, anthropologists. All of these disciplines have been weaponized to discredit non-Western cultures. They pushed race science. They push the idea that certain groups of people are inferior, essentially being used to push the agenda that whiteness is supreme. So I think it's all connected. And I'm not saying I agree with people who are saying shit like vaccines cause autism, da, 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 da. They got wires in the mask. But I'm saying the blame of how all of this is playing out is by design. First, they say this knowledge is valid. Then they manipulate you and say, actually, don't listen to these people anymore because it's too many Black people in the field now. It's too many people of color in the field. It's too many women who are trying to break open this thing. So now you can't trust it. I think that's what it's really about. Quote unquote DEI, I guess, is the problem. The DEIs. But yeah, so I think that's where it started and why this is where we are. I don't know. I just feel like the people who want to keep this sort of racial hierarchy, they're always going to find a way to manipulate the situation. And they're going to find a new way, as Toni Morrison says, to discredit a way of knowing. They're always going to find a way to make it align with how they want the world to operate and where they want us to be on the hierarchy, as far as like Black people and anybody else who is an able-bodied white person.
I'm glad that you brought up scientists, because something that had been bothering me a lot was like information about traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. I did acupuncture a couple years ago, and for me, it was a last resort. I didn't really believe in it, but it was like I was in so much pain. I was going to the doctor, and they were like, we don't know what's going on. Good luck with that." And I was like, okay. So I was basically on my own, and I was like, I don't know if acupuncture will work, but let's see. And it actually did work. It was the only thing that worked for me. And I remember so many people being like, well, it's just a placebo. And I can't believe you're so naive and gullible to fall for it. And I think it's very important to remember that, like, the United States is 4% of the population, the global population. There is 90%, 96% of the world out there, right? Most of the world is in Asia, and a lot of Asia follows traditional Chinese medicine, follows acupuncture. Acupuncture is a 2,000-year-old science. It is one of the oldest sciences and medical systems that we have. But when I was looking up, like, why do people discredit it so much, someone made a very good point of it's because it's Chinese. And the United States hates the Chinese, and they push forth all this propaganda that the Chinese don't know anything. They're not good at anything. They're not capable. They're actually poor. They're a terrible country. And I was kind of happy with the quote unquote TikTok ban. Because a lot of people got on Red Note and they were like, wait a second, y'all said Chinese people are poor, but they all own the houses and the apartments they live in. And once they buy it, they don't have to keep paying taxes on it. And also, their rate of homelessness is under 1%. And also, do you see how many groceries they have and how cheap they are compared to here? Like, the price of corn in China is less than the price of corn in the United States. And the corn that they get in China comes from the United States. And it's things like that. Like, they are living much better lives than any US propaganda tells us they are. And a lot of that is to push forth an agenda that, we're the greatest country in the world. And they do that by not showing us how amazing other countries are. And I'm not saying China is perfect. I know China has its problems, but a lot of what we think about the rest of the world is heavily influenced by what the US government wants us to think about them.
It's such a good point to make. But the thing that they do is they will discredit it, and then they'll take the information and name it something else and then put it out under the guise of them discovering it. It kind of reminds me of the epigenetics thing. Back when I listened to the Friend Zone and Fran, it was when she did like a segment on health and self-care and different information and about how trauma gets passed down genetically, I guess, and how she talked about how some people didn't really believe in that or is seen as pseudoscience. But now the science community is getting on board, because when Black people would say things like, we still carry the scars of slavery, get over it. But we do. It's probably one of the most significant aspects of like issues happening within our community, like those scars, that trauma, and it doing something to our brain. Because a lot of us really have to work hard to unpack a lot of the shit that was normalized in our families, that was normalized within us, that we now see as like, no, this is actually really terrible. I won't go on a tangent about that, but we could talk about it one day.
Okay. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into some ways you can support the Hoodoo Plant Mamas. One is through our bookshop, where you can buy the books that we previously discussed with our Writing the Spirit guests. We also have a Hoodoo Beginner's Guide, as well as our top reading picks. We also have our top tarot cards and oracle card deck section, so check that out too. You can also buy Leah's books on Bookshop. Every purchase you make helps support our show. Check us out at bookshop.org/shop/Hoodoo Plant Mamas, or hit the link in our show notes. Other ways you can support us include rating and reviewing the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas. We are no longer on the app formerly known as Twitter. So, yeah.
You can also check out our Patreon, where we share exclusive video, plant, and spiritual content for only $3 a month. Shout out to our new patrons, Crystal and Serena. We are so lucky to have you. If you prefer a one-time donation, you can donate via Cashapp, # Hoodoo Plant Mamas, or our PayPal, hoodooplantmamas@gmail.com. And thank you, Andrea, for your donation during our break. Let's get back to the show. Something that I wanted to get into was the ethics around knowing, and it's something that I still struggle with to this day. Like, when you know something, especially about someone else, when do you decide to share it? Do you even share it? Like, what do you do with that information? And so I remember one instance in particular where this girl that I went to high school with, she was getting married, and in the dream, she was like, it was like me from her point of view, and she was like running away from her soon to be husband, and he was like hunting her down with his friend. And by the time he had like caught up to me, he like attacked, and then everything went black, and I was like, oh my god, what does this even mean? But it just gave me a really uneasy feeling about them and about this marriage that was coming up. And I remember telling you about it because you know the person as well. And you were like, even if you told her, she won't listen to you. Because we both know that like she is someone that really values marriage. She wanted to get married so bad. That dream ended up becoming true in a way. It wasn't so much like he's physically hurt. Well, I don't know if he's physically hurting her or not. But someone that he cheated on her with came to me and told me about it. I was like, so I was like, dang, is this my dream? And a part of me felt guilty because it was like, I knew that this was not someone she should be marrying, but I didn't say anything. And I was like, but it's not really my fault. But also, like, why would I get this information if I'm not supposed to do something with it? And I ended up writing a short story to kind of process my feelings around that dream. But in the end, I still like, honestly, today, I still kind of feel guilty. And I was like, I wish I would have told her about what was happening, and I didn't. So I just wonder if, Dani, you've experienced something similar where things have come up in your dreams about someone else, and can you talk about how you navigated that?
Yes, first I want to say, when it comes to this kind of stuff with people in their relationships, sometimes it was the right thing to not say anything, because that has blown up in my face several times. People don't want to believe. If they don't want to believe something, they're not. And then they'll flip the script on you like you're the problem. I feel like I've lost or almost lost friends over that shit. So I'm just like, you know what, girl? I'm going to stay out of it. But for me, I think I've talked about on here about the pregnancy dreams I've had. And usually, how the dream happens is I am put as the vessel for the baby. Like, I am the one pregnant, or I am the one holding this baby that's supposed to be mine, but it's not. And I know it's not. When I wake up, I know it belongs to someone. So usually I'll reach out to friends and say, hey, just so you know, I had a dream. One of y'all are pregnant. Usually I'm right. Sometimes people just don't want to disclose. I found out when I made put out that message before, I found out later from a person that was embarrassed about it for whatever reason, and had an abortion, and there was some trauma around that, and so she didn't tell me until after the fact, and I was like, that's fair. You're not entitled to, no, none of them are entitled to tell me if it's them. I just like to give people a heads up because it's like, just go get it checked out. If you concerned, it might be you. On the other hand, I had a dream of myself being pregnant and getting an ultrasound and the doctor revealing that the baby was dead. It was actually such an intense dream. I woke up in shock, and then a few days later, a friend shared with me that they had a miscarriage. I did not tell them about that dream. First of all, there was no reason to. But even if I had known that it was going to be that person, I wouldn't have said a thing. First of all, my feelings around this whole having these dreams is complicated because it's not a gift that I've developed. I seldom know who the person is. There's been maybe 2 times where I was for certain who it was. Most of the time, I just wake up confused and annoyed. But with that said, like, I would never disclose to someone something like a miscarriage. I've dreamed of people dying, and that's something I never disclose either. In most of those cases, the person didn't die. It usually means something else. Years ago, a friend of mine, one of their friends told them, like, oh, I had a dream that something bad was going to happen to you, and da 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 da. And I remember how anxious it made this person, especially because they were already dealing with an issue around their safety, like their personal safety. And I thought that was so out of line. I thought it was irresponsible and really unkind. Like, you're not my friend if you do that. The person is fine, they're safe, but I think it's extremely unethical to share that kind of thing with someone without their consent. If someone comes to you for divination or spiritual guidance, then fine. But even then, there's a way to share things. The person could have simply gifted their friend something for protection or prayed for them. And I imagine it's harder to understand the dangers of disclosing this kind of thing if you don't understand the gift. If it's like, I don't know what to do with this, or you feel there's a guilt where you feel like you should try to warn a person, you should try to figure out a way to prevent a thing from happening. And I get it, but I think it's really important to take a step back and think, is this something I need to share? And if I feel like I need to share this, why? What could be the repercussions? You know what I mean? I don't know. I just think you have to be mindful of that. And you also have to be mindful of your relationship with that person as well. So, yeah, for me, I just try to be responsible. The pregnancy thing, most of my friends know that's a thing about me. It's been a thing about me since I was a teenager, so they want to know. Most of my friends who have sex with men be like, "Please tell me." Sometimes they'll come to me and ask me before I can even tell them, "Have you been having dreams?" And I'll be like, "You know what? Now that I think of it, the maybe like 2 days ago or last week I did dream that a baby was da 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 da." So yeah, but when it comes to the bad stuff, no, I'm just not, like, even no matter how bad I want to, because 9 times out of 10, even if you tell them, there is nothing you can do about what's going to happen. If a person is going to die, you cannot prevent it. In fact, you trying to prevent it might actually make it worse. Or it might end up where now you feel like it's your fault because you shouldn't have been interfering with something like that. So, yeah.
That's a really good point about telling people and it making them paranoid, because a few years ago my younger sister had a dream that I died in a car crash, and I was like, why would you tell me that? Because then I panicked the whole time because I was like, I'm gonna die in a car crash. So, but also in that dream, she had talked about how, like, she had a voice in her head that was like, oh, now mama will know what it's like for me when I was growing up as a child. And at that time, I was writing my memoir about that same exact thing. So I was like, are my ancestors snitching on me? and telling her all my business. But no, I ended up not letting my mama read my memoir. But yeah, that did freak me out, and I was very paranoid about dying in a car crash. And I was like, you should have kept that to yourself.
My grandma has called and checked on me before. It was one time that I remember, and she was like, "Oh, I just wanted to see if you was okay. You know, I just had a dream." And I think I asked, "What was the dream?" She was like, "It doesn't matter." She was like, "I just had a dream and I wanted to check on you." And it's funny because I believe during that time I was dealing with something, like I was really depressed and down. So, ancestors, somebody probably went and dropped something in her dream about me. But yeah, they be snitching. To put it plainly, they do be snitching.
Yeah. So before we leave, I'm just wondering if you have any practical steps to start trusting yourself and your intuition and the clairs, you know.
I believe that there are some gifts that require a mentor or like a spiritual guide. I think my dreams around pregnancy and fertility, that was something I needed support for, and I didn't have it. I also didn't seek out support because a part of me didn't want to carry that burden. It actually at times was extremely stressful. But when it comes to tarot, something I still kind of struggle with, but I'm getting better with. Sometimes you have to go with it, even when you feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm a fraud. Just go with it and see what happens, because a lot of the times you know what you know. You can feel it in your body, you can feel it trying to come out of you, and you are letting that sort of shadow side of yourself convince you that that thing isn't real. Even though you hear it, like you hear it in your head. I can hear a message in my head, and maybe I am clairaudient. I don't know. But I'm starting to figure out who it is. I don't know. I feel like it's me. But you can hear it very clearly. And sometimes it's not even actually hearing it, it's feeling it. I don't know how to describe it, but sometimes I can feel the thing that I'm supposed to say. And I will still convince myself that, like, no, this is just, you're just making it up. So I do believe that you sometimes got to fake it till you make it until it comes natural. As you become more confident and clear on your gifts, I believe that strengthens them. But I do want to reiterate, sometimes you need support, and that's okay. Like, some gifts I think are too big to carry alone. When you don't got nobody in your life that understands, you might grow up in a super Christian family that's really rigid and believes that certain things are demonic. And it can be scary, overwhelming, debilitating. Like if you have, for instance, premonitions and you don't know how to control it. And now you just sitting here like, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask. I've been there. I've been there. So sometimes you need to seek out guidance and figure out, like, who can I talk to? Maybe find some books if you don't feel comfortable going to a person directly. But yeah, building your confidence and going with what your body is telling you, but also seeking support when you need it, because it's really important with certain gifts that you take care of yourself spiritually, because it is intense energy work. Even when you don't have no control over it, energy is moving and you're being impacted. And what I feel like I'm learning is that some of that darkness that you might feel, that depression and stuff that comes up for you, especially when you can't pinpoint it, or you can pinpoint it, but it doesn't make sense that it's affecting you that way. That is a gift moving through your body that you really don't know how to control, and you haven't yet learned how to decipher and understand. And that could be a sign. Number one, go take a spiritual bath, clock in my own tea with that one, and find support. So yeah, that was very long-winded, I feel like, but that's my advice, and some
I think
advice
it's good advice.
yeah, and I'm working on taking my own advice, so please. I am not perfect at all.
I think for me, what really helped with building my intuition, and this was recently, back in August, I did Tatiana Tarot's annual Read Yourself to Filth challenge. And it's a 7-day challenge where she is help guiding you on how to read yourself through tarot cards. And a lot of it is about trusting yourself. Like if you see a card and the first thing that comes to your head is a song, how does that song relate to the card that's there? And I think for me, a lot of times I'll be like, oh, this song is just playing over and over in my head. It's there for no reason. But no, it is there for a reason. Like there was this song that was playing in my head over and over for like a few weeks ago. And I just realized that that was about somebody in my life and how I needed to reach out to that person. But if I would have just dismissed it as like, oh, a catchy song is in my head, I wouldn't have reached out to that person and know that they were like struggling with something. But it's about when things come up in your body, in your brain, listening to it without judgment, without thinking, I'm silly, what's wrong with me? Why are these things coming up? And really believing it. And it has helped me become a much better reader because sometimes I will pull cards and I was like, I'm hearing this word, but I don't know why I'm getting this word. And I'll tell the other person and they're like, oh, that word means this, and that. I don't know where this is coming from. I'm going to be so honest. But it has helped me to become a better reader, just to be like, I'm getting this thing. I don't know what it means, but I'm just going to trust it. Other things that have helped me with intuition, because I struggled a lot with anxiety and with like panic attacks and stuff. So, different types of body work, like massage, getting used to the way that my body felt, yoga helped a lot, somatic therapy. I did EMDR, but there are many types of somatic therapy. Grounding, going and sitting by the trees, sitting by the water without your electronics. All of these things have helped me a lot to like when things come up to be able to listen to them and also to provide a sense of clarity, because I think sometimes, especially when I'm on my phone, my brain will be like 6 different trains of thought at once and it's very hard to like think straight. But doing things like sitting outside by a tree without any electronics, just me and a piece of paper, really does help to like clarify things and clarify like what's coming through, so that way I can start to listen and to believe it.
No, I think that's solid and something I need to work on as far as like grounding. And I mean, I go to the gym. I think the gym and weightlifting, which I've become obsessed with. I told my friend, when men see me, I want them to choose the bear. That's how strong I want to look. Never missing an arm day, never missing a leg day. I'm trying to be out here. I want them to be scared of me so they can stay away from me, please. So yeah, I think there's all kind of ways you can work energy through your body. So maybe that's a way that I'm doing that. But yeah, guess that's it for today. If you like this podcast, you can like, rate, and review Hoodoo Plant Mamas on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If anything from the show resonated with you, make sure to share with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.